Hey friends, welcome to Our Power is Within. I'm your host, Chasmith, aka Just Chaz, and I am on a mission to inspire people to take their power back and help people to realize that each and every one of us has a healer within our own self. When we can create an environment that supports healing and get out of our own way, we are truly capable of healing in mind, body, and soul. Whether you've been following along this whole time, or if this is your first episode, thanks for being on this journey with me. If you could take a minute of your time and help me spread the message of empowerment, healing, and possibility, it would truly mean the world to me. Ways that you can help support this podcast are by leaving a review on Apple Podcast, a 5-star rating if and only if I've earned it, or sharing your favorite episode on social media and tagging me at Our Power is Within. So, what will our challenge be today? Last week was eating with our non-dominant hand, and I have to say I absolutely crushed it. I might add that I even ate left-handed while out on a casual date. And it went really well. I'm fairly certain that he didn't notice unless he was just too nice to point it out. Either way, though, I was feeling pretty jazzed about it. So this week, I'm actually going to totally change it up once again. And this week, I would love for us to all think of one thing that piques our curiosity and give it a try. And bonus points if that thing involves moving your body in some way, which is inspired by today's episode, which is all about movement, exercise, fitness, play, and all things movement integration post-recovery from mind-body symptoms. And whatever you do decide to do, don't forget to do it with a big, giant smile and teach your brain those positive associations. Oh, and speaking of movement, did you guys know that I actually teach movement classes that are designed for anyone who is in recovery from chronic pain or illness? This class is designed to have many variations of movement so that there is a little something for everyone. We try to breathe and laugh our way through movements that have positive impact, not only on the body, but our brains as well. And you can learn more about these classes on my website, which will be linked in the show notes. Okay, guys, so I've already given you a little insight about what today's episode is about, and I am very excited. Our guest today is actually another podcast host, Eddy Lindenstein. He's been actually hosting his own podcast, the Mind and Fitness Podcast, for nearly 3 years now. He is a huge inspiration in the TMS and mind-body symptom community, and I really love the work he's doing. He's a very fantastic podcast host. He's engaging. He asks wonderful questions, and I really enjoy being on the end today asking the questions for him. And P.S., if you did miss it, he actually had me on his show too, and that was a really fun chat. So if you want to check that out, I will also drop a link in the show notes where you can check out that episode as well as all of his other episodes on his podcast. Today, Eddy shares a little bit with us on the background that he has and how he came into the TMS community and the work of mind-body syndrome and just TMS and all things mind-body. We talk about his recovery journey and what he's learned along the way and how he has integrated back into sport and fitness as well. So I hope you enjoy it. All right, you guys, I have Eddy on the line. Eddy is actually a podcast host himself for the Mind and Fitness Podcast. If you have not heard of it, I highly recommend you checking that out. And if you go back several weeks, you'll actually find where Eddy interviewed me. It was really fun. So welcome, Eddy.
Chaz, it is so nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to get to chat with you on the other side of things.
Yeah.
So I think to begin, what I'll do is have you kind of just do a little brief background about you, particularly just a little bit about how you landed in the TMS community and how you came to understand and learn about TMS and what it was and how it kind of relates to your life.
Yeah, definitely. Back in the day, so several years ago, I kind of went through this. I'm a Olympic weightlifter. I train, and for people that don't know what that is, the Olympic. I assume this is going to air before the Olympics will, but it's the only iron sport in the actual Summer Olympics. So it's the snatch and the clean and jerk, and that's what it is. And the United States doesn't usually do all that well in this sport. It's kind of a Chinese dominated. Chinese dominated, North Korea dominated, and those kind of things. The U.S. doesn't do all that well, and which is why it isn't super popular here. But I train Olympic style weightlifting, and about 6 years ago, I've been training since 2012, basically with in the sport. But 2015, I started seeing there was definitely an uptick in the amount of aches and pains that I was having. I would kind of go through this every 3 months. I would start to have like some knee issues, or maybe I have some bicep issues, or some shoulder problems, or elbow problems. And they would kind of always get diagnosed as tendonitis. And, I'd take my anti-inflammatories for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'd be fine. So I'd go to a doctor, and they would get me some prescription stuff, and I would take it, and I would be okay. And then I had a shoulder dislocation when I was training for a competition. And it felt fine right afterwards. Like it, snapped back into place and finished my training session, and then went on my merry way. And then a day or two later, it just really started to be excruciating. And what then followed was I went and saw the same orthopedic guy that I would usually see right afterwards, or maybe the Monday afterwards. And he had said, this is probably just, the same kind of bicep problem that you've had in the past, like the pain that you had. So I got a cortisone injection, and felt fine for a couple of weeks, and then the pain kind of started to come back, and he diagnosed me with a labral tear, and that was based on no imaging or anything like that. And I just thought, like, God, my athletic career was over. And I went and got another opinion, and they had said, we don't really know. And so I kind of just did this ping pong thing with doctors. Fast forward about 6 months, and I actually ended up having surgery for it's called a Bankart tear in the labrum, and it's the underside, so your armpit side. I had a torn rotator cuff and a variety of issues. Went through rehab, did rehab, and was told it would be like 8 to 10 months of rehab time, and then I'd be cleared for all activity. And it was like 4 months and 15 days later, I started I was getting antsy to restart my activity, and the doctor had said, like, you're healing so fast. And then finally, at 4 months and 29 days, I got full medical clearance to resume all activity. That same week, I started having just really wild, like, back and neck spasms. And I had sciatica appear mysteriously maybe a week or so before that. And I had just thought, God, I just got over this shoulder thing, and now I got this arm and this back thing. And 25 medical professionals is what I had saw after that. And I had a neck surgery for it. I had spent so much money, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And then I went and saw this doctor for the University of Washington, and I showed her all the imaging I had. By that point, I had MRIs and EMGs and X-rays and what do you call those? I can't remember the name of it, but just basically a bunch of imaging. And she had actually said that what she thinks is going on is consistent with what she sees in a lot of like athletes, people that push themselves really hard, not physically so much, but kind of mental and emotional strain. And had asked me what do I do for a living, and what's my home life like, and all this kind of stuff. And they were just very different questions than what I had been asked before. She had actually gave me a prescription. She was the first doctor to hand me a prescription pad without a drug on it. And it actually was the number for their sports psychologist for the football team. And that sort of led me down a path of thinking maybe in a little bit different way about this. And I stumbled upon Sarno's book on Amazon and read it. And it was just like, oh my God, like this is the mother lode. And she was totally right. And I just went all in. I hadn't trained weightlifting. I hadn't really done much of anything physically. It had been several months because I had just sort of said, like, I'm going to reserve myself to doing nothing but going on walks until I solve this problem with whatever surgery is needed. But I read Sarno's book on like a Friday or a Thursday, and then the following Monday I was back in the gym training again. And that was in 2017. So I think you only asked about the TMS story, but that's basically that's the genesis of it, was sort of began there. Yeah,
absolutely. That totally leads into it. Okay, so a couple follow-up questions to that is, so you're rehabbing your shoulder, And then right around the time you said that you're getting clearance to go back into activity, you are dealing with some sciatic pain, neck spasms, and back spasms. But you weren't
Yeah.
actually working out really or doing anything for that to be like rationalized, correct?
Not anything certainly that would have. There wasn't anything out of the ordinary that I was doing. I wasn't doing any sort of new exercises. In fact, the moment when the really bad spasming in the back and neck happened, I was doing like banded assisted pull ups, and like you have a CrossFit background, and so think about like a scaled pull up for somebody that has the band at their feet and that kind of thing. Like that's what I was doing, and I had been doing that for several weeks as a part of my rehab, just like very slow and controlled. And that's what I was doing, and I just everything just tightened up. It was like you like shot an arrow in my mid back, and then all the muscles just retracted and or contracted, and it was just sort of stuck that way. Is kind of how it felt, and they were hard as a rock. So yeah, I mean that's really kind of how it began. And years later, looking back, I know that this was just very. Dr. Schubiner said something interesting to me. He was like, TMS really, or the mind body syndrome is more what he calls it, but basically it's going to jump in and do anything it can to grab your attention. Like, do I have your attention now? What sort of activities can I restrict? And the things that I love most recreationally is riding my motorcycle and weightlifting. And I can't do either one of those if my back and my neck are in excruciating pain. So it certainly had my attention.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of, I mean, looking back, it's probably that symptom imperative because your shoulder had your attention for so long, but now you're getting clearance to use your shoulder again. So it's like, wait a minute, let's find
Yeah,
something else to hold him back.
totally. Definitely.
So, okay. Next part question is, did you actually ever even have to, because I know you got the prescription for the sports psychologist, which really like kind of opened up your mind to possibilities. You find Sarno's book, you read it. At any point, did you actually go to any kind of psychologist, or did you actually do any of the type of work?
Yeah, it wasn't a TMS therapist. I had just kind of looked up in my so she gave me the number for the sports psychologist. I had called him. We had like a 15 or 20-minute conversation, and he just kind of told me his methodology. And one of the examples that he had given was like, say that there's a receiver for the team that is used to having 10 catches for 120 yards, and that's kind of his normal game. And then he has a game of one or two receptions, and he has 20 yards and a couple of drops, and he's like, they will send the receiver to me because he could start getting some physical symptoms. And so, but when he gave me his rate and it wasn't covered by insurance, and it was a couple $100 a session, in my mind I was just kind of like, I probably just spent 20 grand out of pocket on all the different types of modalities, maxing out my insurance coverage, all that kind of stuff. So I wasn't dead set on going through that, going with that person. However, I did start looking at psychologist reviews, and actually found a really well-regarded one that wasn't too far from my house and was covered by my insurance. And when I had called and he had asked, what do you want to be seen for? And I had just thought, stress and anxiety. And it's like, okay. And then when I actually went there and had the appointment, I had just said like, here's kind of all the stuff that's happened over the last couple of years in my life from a pain and injury perspective. And I recently just discovered this book by this guy, John Sarno, and he knew all about it. And so I think that he really sort of framed his treatment or our discussions really around that, and around maybe issues that could be a little bit more rooted in that. So it's a yes and no question. He wasn't a TMS specific psychologist, but he was a fantastic psychologist, and he had retired maybe 9 months after I started seeing him. And I tried to find I worked with, I don't know, 2 or 3 people after that just didn't fill the void. We didn't have that kind of we didn't gel the way that Dr. Copeland and I did. So it's a bummer. I wish I had like his personal email address. I would have asked for it because I would totally have kept in touch with him. But who would have known that this guy in his early 30s could have bonded so well with this 77-year-old man.
Right.
But it was great. Yeah, it was awesome.
That's awesome. Okay, so you did do stuff to help reduce the stress load or the anxiety or any of the things in the mental, like mental perspective that could have been adding to the physical pain.
Yeah, so I did some things that that are more like traditional, like when you think about like on social media, hashtag self-care. Like I would go and I I'd like go to a yoga class. Like every Sunday I would go and I would do Kundalini yoga. And, so that was a thing that I had done. And then but then I got a little bit more specific into the TMS stuff with Nicole Sachs's book, like Journal Speak. And I would use Adam Heller's book and sort of what his method would be. And because Sarno's, for the most part, to me, relies so heavily on just kind of having the knowledge behind it. And that's really sort of where it starts and stops. And I know in later books, he went into a little bit more detail about journaling and actually, giving thought to things that are psychological stressors. So I did that stuff too. But yeah, I never ended up seeing a specific TMS psychologist, but I definitely did a lot of the things that we in this community would refer to as the work.
And on some level, though, it sounds like just knowing, like reading the book, you said within days you were back to training. So was just the knowing and the reading of the book and the affirmation that it clicked for you enough to really help catapult you into movement again?
So when I would finish, I read the book in like 2 or 3 days. And when I would stop the first night, when I stopped reading it for the night and just set the book down, there was a dramatic improvement in how just overall tight and tense and intense my symptoms had felt. I would say probably, I don't know, 30 or 40% reduction in symptoms, which is, that for somebody that really, I mean, it was exactly the same or worse every day for months and months and months. And then to read something out of a book that you find to be very believable and to have such a dramatic reduction in symptoms immediately, to me, that was like, that was the proof in the pudding. Like that was so big and so altering that, I felt, okay, this is definitely the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, well, just sometimes reading that and really connecting helps instantly like dissipate the fear, which causes the tension. When you started working out again, how did you approach it? How did you re-enter into the sport? Did you go full in, or did you kind of start out slow and easy and a little bit more cautious?
So there's a term that the kids use these days, and I now ride an electric skateboard. So I see the terminology sometimes, like in Facebook forums and stuff of people enthusiasts that do this stuff too. And the term full send, it was absolutely full send. Like I did it. I would lift in terms of like the weights in a linear fashion, meaning like I'm not going to start trying to PR my snatch on day one because it's been so long, and you would never do that if you were a non-injured athlete going through a weightlifting program. So I would add weight, a couple kilos every week or whatever the case is, to my total or to my squats or whatever. So everything was linear in that fashion. But I didn't restrict. I didn't hold back on any movement. And the majority of the pain issues that I would get was primarily like in my neck and upper back and mid back and into my arms and into my fingers and things like that. And there just isn't really, I mean, in CrossFit and weightlifting, there's not really a way to do it without really heavily involving those parts of you. There was a doctor once that had said, if I put a barbell on my, the back of my neck, as if I'm back squatting, that I may not feel my hands again. That's kind of impossible. If you want to train in weightlifting, like back squats are a huge part of the equation. So I didn't hold anything back. Like I did everything. I did everything the way I would have done it if nothing had ever happened to my shoulder.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. So yeah, you just went back in as if you were just starting like a new program and just progressed yourself. Like,
yep.
Yeah, awesome. And as you were kind of doing that, obviously it seems like in the timeline, that's also where you were still kind of learning more about TMS and doing some of the work and getting involved in all that. What steps did you take to help yourself to continue to trust that little tweaks or little strains that showed up along the way were TMS? Like, how were you able to discern?
So one of the exercises that I did, and it wasn't in Sarno's book, the one that I read, but I feel like it was either in a subsequent TMS book written by somebody else, or maybe it was in a Sarno book written on later. But one of the things that I did just like instinctually was I had made this 2-column list on a piece of paper. This might've been the second night I was reading it, where I just wrote down like every possible symptom or issue or injury or whatever that I had going back as far as I could remember on the left side of the paper. So, it might be knee tendonitis or elbow bursitis or, labrum rotator cuff or knee or, whatever the case is. So I do that on the left side. And this would include things like flu-like symptoms or I got a false diagnosis on C. diff once, which is a really disgusting stomach bacteria. So I did that all on the left side. And then on the right side of the paper, I would write down like what was going on in life at the time. And one of the things that I found correlation wise that really stuck with me and helped me in not having any sort of issues that lasted beyond a few hours or a day or whatever the case was I had found this correlation between all these issues happening in the last month of a quarter. And so like my day job is I'm in software sales, and the way that we gauge everything is on sales. And so the end of the quarter is kind of a highly stressful time, and you're trying to hit your number and max out your earnings and all that kind of stuff. So I would find that every March, June, October, and December, every March and June and September and December, I would have something. It would, and then nothing would happen in the 2 months subsequent to that. So it would always be the end of a quarter. It's like, oh my God, like this makes a lot of sense, putting so much pressure on myself, and I'm trying to be perfect, and I'm trying to be one of the top salespeople, and meanwhile trying to be a dad, and that is its whole other set of issues and that come along with it. And just that knowledge. I mean, again, I went like 5 straight years of every quarter having knee tendonitis or bicep or shoulder or elbow. It's now been 4 years, so let's just say 16 quarters since that point in time, and I haven't had any issue of tendonitis or anything in any of the joints that lasted longer than a couple of hours. Because as soon as I feel something like that, I just say like, I know what the default is. Brain, you're going to have to convince me otherwise. And 100% of the time it's worked.
Wow. That simple.
Yep. That's simple.
You're one of the lucky ones. Wow. Okay. So literally you're looking back after years and years and years of dealing with this, you're looking back and you literally almost every single type of tendonitis, tendinotis, like whatever it is, like all of these little aches and pains, strains all happened in the last month of the quarters.
Yeah, every time that I could think of, and that includes school, like college, by the way. But when I went back and I was thinking about basically everything from 2008 until 2017, every time with 100% accuracy, something was always happening in the last quarter of, or the last month of a quarter. So wild, right?
Yeah.
Now, and since then, I'd said there hasn't been any tendonitis issues or anything like that since, because of this, this certainty that I have. That's not to say that there haven't been other things. I had a mysterious, like really bad back aggravation that happened maybe 2 or 3 months ago. It was on snatch pulls at a weight that have snatched before, no problem. And I could not move my legs when I hit the floor. Like I literally hit the floor immediately. But I was back the next day, and I had an instance of where I was convinced that I had COVID. And my wife had said, what if, I went and I got tested and I was negative. And then my wife said, what if this is just the same thing as all the other stuff? Like, what if this is just more TMS stuff? And lo and behold, all my quote COVID symptoms were gone that night. So
no way, the same night.
So, so these kind of things pop up and they happen, but that's a really great thing about having a really honest spouse also, is that, she'll point something out that's bullshit that I may not even be thinking of. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's funny like that. It can be so tricky. You can have like all these symptoms and all these things that, maybe you haven't had a symptom in a long time and it comes back, but you're like, oh, I know what you are. Yeah. And then all of a sudden something new creeps in, and it can trick you for a minute, especially if you don't have somebody else who can kind of call it out,
Yep. Yeah. And frankly, like if I hadn't read Sarno's books or kind of had the last few years that I've had, if that exact same comment was made, I mean, I often wonder how I would have handled a pandemic without knowing the Sarno stuff. And just knowing, because now I like, even from the first day that everything was shut down, I remember exactly where I was. And, the NBA turned out, my buddies and I were at a bar and we were watching the NBA games, and they called all the players off the court and the NBA shut down and they canceled March Madness. And like, there was all, it was like a really crazy day. It was a Wednesday. I remember exactly where I was. And if I didn't have the Sarno knowledge to basically say to myself, like, it's all going to be fine. It'll all go away. It's probably going to take a long time. It's going to take, a year, a couple of years, or whatever the case is. But just kind of having that overall confidence and knowing, I think that's a derivative of the Sarno work too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because the mind can be so powerful. Had you not had your wife call that out, you got better that night. But had that not happened, I only wonder how much more symptoms could have expedited by the next day into a full-blown flu or cold just because of the fear around it and believing it.
I'll tell you one of the more, and I'm only not saving this because I don't know if you'll ask a question that'll lead me to it. And I think it's actually one of the more miraculous things in all of this is since 2011, which is when I had started in software sales. So ironic. But I started having mysterious like asthma and allergy issues that I hadn't had before. And I got Proda on, it was either 4 or 5 prescriptions, daily prescriptions, which is, it's just kind of obnoxious to have to keep going back to the doctor to get these prescriptions, not refilled, but, like on a refill, it'll say like you have 2 rounds left or whatever. Then you have to go back and they sort of re-examine you and stuff. I stopped all those. It would be like where if I didn't take all 4 or 5 of those, I couldn't even like breathe or function for the day. I haven't taken any of those now in 4 years since I took the Sarno, read the Sarno book. And I think it's for the exact same reasons. I don't have the asthma and the allergies and those kinds of problems anymore. And to me, like, and I mean, on top of that, like I had a really crippling dairy allergy that would make me just feel nauseous upon nauseous that also is completely gone. I was thinking like one of the really cool things this past March was, on St. Patrick's Day, we get our kids Lucky Charms. It's like the only time of the year that they'll have Lucky Charms that we even think of buying it. Not that like I'm like an overall strict eating parent, even though I swore I would be, but we just never buy them. But we had them on that, and I remember thinking like, oh, we're out of cashew milk, and then I just had regular milk and didn't think anything of it. And then later on, I was like, how fucking cool is that? Sorry if I explicit, but not even having to give it a second thought. Whereas 5-6 years ago, like that would have sent me to the floor probably with stomach pain just by having dairy. So like prescription medications, asthma, allergies, food intolerances, like those are all things that went by the wayside the same way all the joint issues did.
Right. Yeah. You didn't have allergy issues to the environment. You had allergy issues to the software sales.
Right.
Stress.
Yeah. To all the BS. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's cool though. Right when you read the book by Sarno, you also instantly attributed kind of all of it under that umbrella.
Yeah. I think that one of the biggest things that, and this could just be a part of like getting older too, but really just kind of putting into question like kind of everything. Like what sort of preconceived notions or notions have I had about various parts of life just in general that I was so certain on that now I can reevaluate and think about. And I think that that's just sort of an overarching theme of life in general. Like just being able to admit to myself, and my wife, again, will point this stuff out to me, but sometimes when I get so worked up about certain things and she'll say, you're projecting. And 5 years ago, I would have thought like, fuck you. Like I'm not projecting, but now like I can say to myself, like, yeah, I am projecting. So it's just sort of the Sarno stuff really just made me kind of question everything that I thought that I knew really about everything. Because the way that I was handling or interpreting life in general, I think is kind of what led me to illness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. I think if I've learned anything through this whole experience, it's to just not be so damn rigid, or to not and to just question everything and to just stay curious.
Yep.
And so you kind of already did answer what my next question, which was going to be, which was if you had experienced any TMS symptoms outside of the musculoskeletal pains, and you had the allergies, the asthma, and then you said this crippling dairy allergy. Did you have anything else other than that you didn't even maybe know at first was mind-body syndrome, or that even if you did notice right away, oh, this is probably that as well?
Yeah, I had, I've recently thought about this. I know when we moved from, when I was a kid, I was like 9 years old or something. We moved from California to Washington. So, I left my friends and my school and everything that I really knew and my beautiful weather that I was used to all the time. Like, Christmas Day, you get a new toy and you can go outside in shorts and a tank top and play, because we were in like the hot valley, which wasn't, I've gone back in like June and July and August since then sometimes. And I'm like, I don't know how I ever lived here, but I did. And I loved it. And it was a great place to grow up. But I moved here, and not long after that, I would have really terrible nosebleeds. And it went on for like 2 or 3 years. I would have, I don't know, 1 or 2. And I don't mean like a little bit of a nosebleed. I mean, like I would wake up and the entire side of my face would be laying in a pool of blood, and I would get clotting and all this kind of stuff. So that's something that I think back that, hey, maybe that was a part of it. Food poisoning issues, or pseudo food poisoning, as I think of it. My wife and I'll eat exactly the same thing, and I would have gotten food poisoning and she didn't. Like, things like that are very curious to me now, looking back. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of a lot of the stuff that kind of comes to mind are those particular things.
Wow, cool. I mean, not cool to have them, but cool to just be able to like look back and reflect now and kind of connect the dots. I would guess that the 9-year-old nosebleed thing was totally mind body syndrome.
Yeah. And I remember when I was like a mid teenager ish. And there's a garbage truck coming up my street, and my garage doors are open, and I should close them. But in case you need to edit it out or whatever the case is, I had went to a doctor for it, and he had talked about cauterizing, which, if you don't know what that is, it's like basically burning the inside of your nose to make it not bleed, or not have nosebleeds anymore. And I was like telling my mom, like, no, I do not want to do that. But it wasn't a problem anymore. I didn't, it wasn't happening, so I didn't have to worry about it at all. But yeah, I haven't had a nosebleed other than like my kid once, she may have like bumped me in the nose or something when we're wrestling around, and I might get a little bit of bleeding from that. But I don't get these mysterious waking up in the middle of the night, drenched pillow incidents happening anymore, which is great.
I would say that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you have had, over these past like several years, when you've really dialed in and it seems like you've overall felt pretty good, you're doing your weightlifting, when you do have little, bouts of TMS show up in your body, for the most part, what you've explained so far is you're pretty much back to training the next day. Even when you had that bad back aggravation from the snatch pulls, you said you were on the floor, but the next day you were back to working out. Have you had any situations that made you, like, have you had any kind of little minor injuries that actually were a result of the weightlifting and the demands you're putting on your body from the activities?
It's really tough to say. There's not anything. I mean, there have been instances where maybe I've like overpulled a snatch and kind of felt like, because when I dislocated, I had pulled too hard, which is it was on a PR. And so pulling too hard where the bar just kept going behind me is sort of a good problem to have in situations like that, because it means that I'm actually finishing my pull and I'm going far enough with it. I've had a couple where I've caught them super far back like that and kind of feel a little bit of a twinge, but it's never anything that's resulted in an injury. And I think that also maybe part of it is like, there's this great quote. So the Dark Knight trilogy is my favorite set of movies ever. And there's this quote that Alfred says to Bruce Wayne. I think it's in the third one, but he says, "Know your limits." And I don't really put a limit on myself all that much. However, I am cognizant of the fact that, like, athletes do need time to recover just in general, and sort of treating not just athletic training as hey, you have a certain amount of exertion that you can put out in a given week or a given day or a given month or cycle or whatever the case is, but actually like throwing life into that same bucket and just understanding that, like, hey, if it's a super stressful time at work, maybe I dial back the programming and this is a great time for a deload. Whereas maybe I didn't do those things before. So there's certain things that maybe I wouldn't have done 5 or 6 years ago because it was always like go, and just being so, like you had said, rigid in my thinking or strategies or whatever the case is. So maybe part of the reason that I haven't had an injury that's kept me out is that I do a lot more balancing now, just of things in general. Like for instance, this cycle is going to wrap up in 2 weeks. And I know that as the weather gets nicer, I'm going to want to go on more hikes. I'm going to want to ride my skateboard more. I'm going to go ride my bike more. So, a weightlifting cycle where that's all that I'm focusing on for 4 or 5 days a week is probably not, it's not giving me a good variety of things to do. So maybe it's time to dial it back to 1 or 2 days a week and then go do some other recreation thing for the other time. So it could be a mix of things. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you're just approaching it more mindfully.
Yeah.
And yeah, where before, and I know I've been in that place, in that pre Dr. Sarno, pre awareness of TMS and all that, you just think you're a machine and you can just push, 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 push. And then you kind of get smart and you're like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and create some balance here. And if I want to go do these other things, maybe I don't need to do it all the time.
Yeah. I think one of the things that men are really bad at this, maybe women are, but I'm not one who can't speak to it, but we compartmentalize a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I, again, years ago would have been like, oh, if I'm injured, it's because I train too much. But if I were to get injured now, my immediate thought would go to A, life stuff, but then two, it's a mixed bag of training stuff and life stuff and kids and work and, bills and all that kind of stuff. Like I even have, there's a ride, by the time this airs, we're going to be well past it and hopefully everything went fine. But this coming Saturday, my buddy and I, we've been talking about doing this for 2 or 3 years. We're going to do what's called the Iron Butt Challenge. And you're riding a motorcycle for 1,000 miles in one day. It's like 20 hours in the saddle. And it's finally happening, but I am getting a little bit of nerves heading into it because, we'll be starting at 4 a.m. We'll be finishing up at midnight. We're riding into Montana. There's bears, and there's elk, and there's all sorts of stuff that could at any point in time just come out on the roads that we're going to be on. And I'm intentionally giving, like, I've structured my workouts this week to where I'm going to have 2 or 3 days of really no activity outside of walking the dog or doing landscaping or whatever, in the 2 or 3 days leading up to it, because just, again, trying to completely balance everything in my life with the other sorts of stresses that I would have.
Mm-hmm. So you're training smarter.
Yeah. Maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. That's good for you. Because I know even as a coach in my previous life, I would constantly have to explain to people like, hey, if you get really like a really stressful period of your life and you only slept 4 hours last night, it might say today's a 1 rep max day, but maybe it's not your 1 rep max day because you got to take all that other stuff into account.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So as far as like mindset, when you have something happen, like the day that you did get the back pain from the snatch pull, how are you able to kind of keep yourself from letting your brain default back into old patterns of fear? Because you legitimately did do something that could warrant a strain or aches or pains. So what do you do to keep your mindset right so that you don't do that default and that you are able to get back into training the next day again?
Yeah. So for me, the best way I think to answer this question is just using logic. Again, the pulls that I was doing in that particular moment were weights that I had done before, no problem. And so to me, that's sort of like red light number one. Is it possible that biomechanically I was lifting a little bit differently or from a different angle, or my chest wasn't as up as much, or whatever the case may be? Maybe. But even so, like, I lift heavy stuff all the time and there's never a problem. So that was sort of the first thing. But I mean, literally, like, I pulled the bar up. I felt someone stabbing me with a hot knife in my lower back on the right side. And the bar fell. In fact, my daughter was up in her bedroom, heard the bar fall, ran down to ask if I was okay. And I was laying on the ground, and laying down, but in a way where my feet are up as if I'm like sitting on a chair, because that was the only position that I could keep. And it was like, even if I tried to move a leg, the nerve pain, I guess maybe is the best way to describe it, was so terrible and jarring that I just didn't do that. But I army crawled my way to my phone and text my buddy Brad, who runs a TMS group with me on Facebook. I said, bro, it happened just now. And he's like, what? And I told him, like, I'm having a back incident and it's unreal. And he said, well, what were you thinking about just prior? What were you thinking about around that time? And there were a couple of things that I was just sort of thinking about, or were in my head, or were just, kind of running thoughts or whatever. So for me, it's like, it's at least with that, it was so automatic that there was no way for me to set back into an old pattern, because it's a default now. So, sometimes, like, I said earlier that sometimes, like, maybe I'll get a little twinge or something in the knee, but it goes away literally immediately. Like there's times when I'll say I'll be on like a three rep on a front squat or something, and I do rep 1 and I feel something in my left knee, and my immediate thought is like, ooh, no, I don't think I should take that too seriously. And then I go down and I do reps 2 and 3. And I think maybe part of it is like, I call it the invincibility factor, but going through all this stuff the way that I have, sort of understanding and kind of treating my body, or the way that I see my body, very much as like classic Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Like I'm sort of indestructible is kind of how I think about it at this point in time. And so if my knee gets tore up, then my knee gets tore up. That's just kind of the way that it is. And I think that having that kind of an attitude has made me a better motorcycle rider. It's made me a better skateboarder. It's made me really kind of better at everything I do, because I take more chances and I can expand my limits a little bit. And so what if I get hurt? I get hurt. What it reminds me of was, this was way pre-Sarna. This was 2010. But prior to that, I was always very afraid of flying, like, just going on a commercial plane. And from the time that I would sit down and actually like put the seatbelt on, all the way until the plane was at its cruising altitude, 30,000 feet. And then I would go through it again at descent and landing. But like, I would shake, like physically shake, and I would have, sweaty palms, and I would be gripping the seats and all that kind of stuff, because I like, if this plane goes down, what's going to, I'll die. And then there was this moment on a flight. I was going to Dallas to do some nonprofit stuff for an event down there, going to Texas Stadium, and we were flying into an ice storm in January, which I didn't think that Texas had ice, like let alone snow, or like even anything under 70 degrees was always what I had thought. And the plane, they're descending, and they said, we're heading into an ice storm and there's going to be turbulence. And I remember I just kind of closed my eyes and I envisioned myself. I've heard Nicole Sachs say something similar before, but I envisioned myself like outstretching my arms as this plane is going down, and just saying like, whatever happens, I'm going to be fine with it, because there's nothing that I can do anyway. It's just going to happen. And that's, if that's the end, that's the end. And that's in a lot of ways how I approach any sort of a potential injury or twinge or whatever. It's like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And I think that subtle, not freak out, is a big contributor to sort of what gives me that feeling of invincibility at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So many things I could say to this. One, I want to say, I think it's a fantastic idea, and I wanted to highlight it for anyone out there listening. So Brad, it seems like, is kind of like almost a TMS buddy. Like you could call him in a moment where your mindset could go one of two directions, and he was able to reel you back in and ask the right questions to help you focus and remember, oh, what's going on in your life, what could be stressful, what might you have been thinking about, and really bring that focus back to that, rather than it being physical, where you could end up going into fear or worry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great to have because, maybe in the past it would be somebody like, oh, what were you doing? Oh, this was wrong, and they start like exasperating the fear because of their worry and their focus on it being physical.
Right.
And,
so remember whatever it is you're going to say next. What makes me think of the thing that you just said, I had been in a very slow rollover car accident. Is not the best way to describe it, but back in, I think it was like 2007, I had slid off the road on some snow and some ice, and my car tipped on its side. And the only person I could think to call was my brother. And I had said, yeah, no, I think I feel fine. I'm like, I was going 20 miles an hour, and it was a soft, gentle landing into this ditch, and I'm just waiting on AAA. And he said, you could be in shock and your back could be destroyed, and you just don't even know it because all the adrenaline's going. Like, that's not the person to call. That's not the TMS buddy.
Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I think anyone who's out there listening, get a TMS buddy, somebody who can like reel you back to like logic, like you said. And then something else I was going to say is, I really like how you brought up, like how you kind of just treat yourself almost as indestructible. I really like this approach. Something I noticed with myself for a period of time, and with many people in this community, is, and it's understandable. We get hurt, we get injured, we have illness, we're sick, and over time, you go through all the hoops, all the medicine, the different treatments, you're kind of getting worse. it can be really easy to fall into a mindset of fragility and to start feeling like we're fragile or we're broken or, you know, something's wrong with us, especially in the musculoskeletal community where you go to all these practitioners. And nowadays there's all these specialists who, I don't know what your thought is on this, but there's all these programs or like movement systems right now that are catered to like people in the chronic pain and illness community that legitimately like teach, almost exasperate the thought or mindset that we're fragile. Like they have us move in such a way that actually says, oh, you're fragile, oh, you're broken, you need to do these things and be so gentle or you could be hurt. And I don't know, that doesn't sit well with me because I really want to like empower people to step into their resilience and their strength and to remember that we're actually extremely resilient, capable, and we're so much stronger than we realize. And I think that getting stuck in that mindset of treating yourself and coddling yourself as if you're fragile can be so detrimental.
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind, and there are few words in the English language that I hate more than posture. And um, I I don't know if it's so big now. It certainly was when I was looking for it. Maybe that's why it was so big. But what I wanted for so long was an explanation for all my pain. How did I go from being a competitive weightlifter to suddenly everything hurts? An empty barbell hurts. Wearing a back. I remember going to Europe with my wife and my oldest daughter at the time, and we did 3 weeks in Ireland and Scotland and England. And I'm looking at pictures recently because it was almost exactly 4 years ago that we went and did this. So this was a few months before finding Sarno. But all the pictures, I'm pushing the stroller. I'm not wearing the backpack. And so my wife would wear the backpack and I put the stroller because I was told that having a backpack on my trapezius and the brachial plexus and where all these nerves and arteries and all this stuff was, that mine was damaged. And so by having something as light as a backpack with some diapers in it could severely damage me. But I also think about, it's Rogue sells it. It's by a company named Spud, I think, but they sell something called the bow tie. And the idea is it's almost like a reverse bra, usually for men, where they wear it like a backpack, but it's really, really tight. And the idea is that it's pulling your shoulders back, because the explanation for so long has been that that chiropractors would tell me is that, hey, the reason there's so much pain right now is because people have jobs where they're working in front of them all the time. And now in thinking back, just again, using the tool of logic and just saying like, what fucking point in time in history was everybody having a job that didn't require them having their arms in front of them? Mm-hmm. Why is the pain so much higher now for so many people when every job seemingly that everybody's always had has always been something that's in front of them, whether it's manufacturing or building muskets or doing machinery work or doing landscaping or whatever the case is? Like, why is it now? Like, why is everybody why are their bodies breaking down now? And that is, one of the things that doesn't make sense to me now anytime anybody says the word posture. So I'm obviously in agreement with you that the fragility thing is, and it's something that I wish that I had more sensitivity to with people in my, my closer inner circle, my family and stuff like that, that at this point in time, like I can't even hear this ultra fragile attitude without fortunately for me, internally rolling my eyes, because I haven't done it on the outside yet, but it's always the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I have a lot of compassion just because I went through that phase for sure. And it was really, truly Dr. Sarno's, his books that really expanded my mind again and reminded me wait a minute, no, our bodies are so brilliant and so strong. I'm not going to treat myself like I'm broken.
Yeah.
I do wonder though, for some people, I wonder how they find the balance, how you can find the balance between there is a need sometimes for graded exposure to things, but then also this balance of trusting that you're strong enough. I don't know if you have any, through the years of experience you've had, I don't know if you have anything to say on that.
I guess, tell me what you mean by graded exposure, because I may, but I'm misunderstanding the question.
Well, I think I'm not sure who, I think it's Schubiner who says use graded exposure. So if say there's something that say, for example, your brain has learned a false association with sitting, you associate sitting as back pain, or you associate running with knee pain or something. If you have any false associations with a certain exercise movement activity, how do you get back into that in a way that you're not going all in where you're risking too much of a flare up, but also at the same time doing enough to trust that you're strong enough. Does that make sense?
It does. So it can be found on YouTube still, but still one of my favorite things that I go back to, and I probably watch it, I don't know, once every 3 or 4 months, even though I know probably every word from the segment at this point. But the 2020 special on Sarno from the late 90s that Jeanette Barber was featured on, and there was like a lawyer and there was some other guy, an accountant or something like that. But one of the things that he was talking about was that he's back to doing everything that he was doing before he started having a bunch of pain. And John Stossel had asked, like, what do you do when the pain comes along? And it could be benign activities like sitting, like some of the things you're talking about. And he had said that it's the talking to his brain part that is what he uses in pretty much all situations like that. As, he starts to do an activity, could be sitting down, could be working out, could be going on a walk, whatever, things that gave him pain before. And then he starts to get this pain creeping up, and he literally will talk to his brain in such a way to, like, almost like a angry dog that's running up to you, and you're like, no, damn. His exact quote is, "Damn you, down boy," and he said it goes away. And I've employed a lot of that kind of stuff because there are certain things that used to be stupidly killer, reaching into a crib to grab a kid, leaning over to change a diaper. Like there's these things that don't even make sense. Like they shouldn't hurt. But the only way for me to be able to get through those things was to employ like a talking in my brain tactic. Because like conditioning and learned pathways and things like that are definitely a huge part of the equation. But that's why Schubiner written books that are called Unlearn, like literally.
Yeah.
And I think the only way to unlearn is to unwind.
Yeah, I think it really starts with the knowledge and the trust. Because again, if you're still thinking that you're fragile, then you can talk to your brain all you want, but it's not sincere. But if you absolutely know and trust and believe that this is just a learned behavior, that's a great place to start.
Yep.
Yeah. So what suggestions do you personally have for anyone who might be listening, who's at a place in their recovery and they're feeling like they're really ready to begin integrating back into their sport or fitness, but feel hesitant or don't really even know where to begin or how to approach it?
Yeah, so I think for me to get back to doing activity for anybody, like if that's where they want to go, they just need to go and do it. And I know it sounds really simple, but like that's the way they need to go. But I think that pivotal to that is finding things that like you genuinely enjoy. Whether like if CrossFit was your old sport and you love doing that, like go and do that. And if you feel the need to modify, I think that's fine. But coming off of those modifications quickly to get to a point of, trusting yourself and being at a place that you were. I think that part of this though is that you really just have to full send or just go and do the thing. But I also think like finding new hobbies that are physical based are a big important part of that too. Like if you would have told me 2 years ago, even a year and a half ago, that I would be like, I would have bought like some badass hiking boots and would be seeking out 12-mile hikes through the wilderness, I would have told you were crazy. But now like I'm doing those and I love that, I love that kind of stuff because it's like possible to become now one with nature, but it's like a new activity, a new challenge, something that my body didn't know it could do that now it can do. Riding a bike, which I wouldn't have thought about doing as a hobby a couple of years ago, riding an electric skateboard. So just like finding things that are new and appealing and fresh and stuff like that, just ways to move. If you're not moving, you're dying. And I'm sure that somebody said that and they should get credit for that quote, but I don't know who the first person to say it was. But that's kind of how I feel about a lot of this stuff. I think that if people want to get back to doing sport or athletics or the things that they want to do again, like they have to go and do it. Because I'll get emails from people all over the world every single week that will say, I used to do X and I want to go back to doing that again, but I just don't know how because it hurts every time I do it. And it really honestly is like, well, what have you done to work towards that? Or what have you done to go and do that? And they said, not really a lot yet because I'm scared of hurting myself. Or maybe there's somebody that used to do Olympic style weightlifting and now they're doing leg presses and hip adductor exercises and stuff like that are almost more rehab than they are activity. And so that's kind of where, again, just pointing back out to them like, hey, you're sort of doing the thing, but you're not really doing the thing. You're kind of doing it in like a roundabout way. and just sort of challenging and pushing on that a little bit. And I think once people can get to a place of doing that themselves, that's where a lot of the secret sauce is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I really like that you mentioned start new types of movement hobbies, because what that's going to do for people is develop new neural pathways. And they're going to be these positive associations with activity that will hopefully then kind of lead into that other sport that they think they want to get back to and help create new associations. And what's really funny is, who knows, along the way, people might discover that they have some new passion or hobby that they love even more than what they thought they wanted to get back to.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
I know that happened to me. I don't think that, I think in a lot of ways our sickness, our disease, our injuries aren't necessarily a mistake, and they lead us into something that becomes more authentic and real for us.
Yep.
Something you said too about that made me think of something we were talking about a little while ago, and I forgot I wanted to point out, which is how you were like, oh, if I get like a knee twinge on my first rep, I'm like, all right, I'm going to do my next reps, and you do the next 2 reps. And you're like, so what? What's the worst that can happen? I get an injury. And I was thinking how something that we learn along this process also is how capable we are of healing. So it's almost like if you get stuck in that fear of, oh my gosh, I might be injured. But the thing is, our body wants to heal. So even if the worst case scenario is an injury, we can like almost calm down our nerves to know that if that's what happens, we can heal. It's not a permanent like life sentence.
Right. I mean, when I had my shoulder injury, which to me it's debated to this day if that was a TMS thing or if that was just a really bad injury. Because going into surgery, I felt 99%. I if I could go back in time, I probably would have at least delayed the surgery by a couple of months and just sort of saw what happened. But when that first happened, I had thought, for me, it was a death sentence. This is what I'm going to have to deal with forever. And now just knowing that that's not true. Like, let's say that thing where, I did the snatch pull and I hit the ground was an actual, quote, legitimate back injury. 5 years ago, me would have thought that like, that's the end. I've got 10 months or 12 months or 2 years or whatever of rehab before I can get back to doing what I love to do. But again, just that shift to say like, if that's the case, that's the case. What else am I going to do? Right.
Right.
If that plane crashes, what can I do about it? I can't, I don't know how much planes weigh, but there's nothing I can do to stop this huge thing from crashing into the ground. It's just going to happen. And that indifference is like such a powerful tool. I think in life overall, like even in my sales career, it's been really valuable to say like, it used to be if a prospect was, if I worked 6 months or a year or whatever on a contract, and then they told me no, like I was devastated. Everything in life was terrible. But now, like when that stuff happens, it's just sort of like, oh, on to the next one. I'll be here in 6 months. Like nothing's going to happen. And it's put less stress on me. It's put less stress on my clients. It's put less stress just, on the overall process and just sort of, letting things roll along. Maybe that's getting older, or maybe it's some influence from all this, this health BS over the last few years.
Or a combination of the two.
Yeah, could be that.
For sure. So yeah, I want to shift gears just a little, just because I want to respect the time here. And I wanted to mention, so you've been doing this podcast that you have, the Mind and Fitness podcast, for several years now. Like you reached the 3-year mark, right?
Yeah, well, 3 continuous years. So when I started doing it, it was in the fall of 2017, and I did 14 straight episodes. And then my daughter Audrey was born in January of 2018. So I took like a 4-month hiatus, and because at the time when I first started the podcast, the intent was to be all fitness related. So it would be, if people ever go back and listen to the first couple of episodes, it was like, Tia, what was your sets times reps, and what was your, how did you feel you did in that event, or how's your program going and stuff like that. And nobody gave a shit. So I'd get 15 listens and I would be pumped that 15 people listened to it. And then like 4 or 5 episodes in, I interviewed this former Marine who went out, he told this story about having these migraine headaches now, and that he thinks that they're tied back to losing friends in the military. And then I get this enormous amount of feedback from people that love stories like that. This issue that's currently happening to him on a physical level, that's based on an emotional experience. And to me, I was like, oh, maybe that's the future direction. But now Audrey's going to be born. Steve Ozanich was the last person that I interviewed before the hiatus. But yeah, so it's aired every Wednesday since like mid-May of 2018. I think it's 180 episodes in. So there's been a brand new episode every Wednesday since then.
Wow, 180 episodes. I'm like stoked on my 42. But one week at a time.
Yeah.
Okay, so 180 episodes. You've interviewed a lot of people, whether it's testimonials, experts in the field. So you've learned a lot along the way. If you could share one overarching piece of advice with anyone who's listening right now, wherever they're at in their journey, what would it be?
This is easy. It's funny because some people will message me and they'll say, I have this issue going on, and I think you talked about it. Can you tell me what episode number you talked about this on? I don't fucking know. It's 180 episodes in. That's not easy. When I interviewed Dr. Schubiner in the summer of 2019, I think it was the summer of 2019, there's two pieces here. So one came from Dr. Schubiner, and he was talking about thinking of yourself as a detective. And one of the things that he had said was like a soft tissue or a musculoskeletal injury or issue, pain, if your symptoms stay the same or get worse, if they stay the same or they linger, then like case closed. It's a mind-body issue. And he said soft tissue injuries, little by slowly, every day, you feel a little bit better than you did yesterday, a little bit better than you did yesterday. If you get this kind of waning and waxing, which I think describes the majority of people that have TMS, like, maybe 2 hours they feel fine, and then 3 hours later they feel terrible and all this kind of stuff. That's like case closed. So I think that's probably the biggest piece, like the biggest telltale thing is that you've got this really respected doctor at Providence Hospital in Detroit that's saying like, here's the evidence for you. Because I think it describes nearly all people that have a TMS or mind-body pain issue that's musculoskeletal in nature. I think that covers just about all of them. The other piece was Dr. Alicia Batson, because food sensitivities and perceived allergies are such a big piece of, I think, TMS these days, and the ones that people don't think about. It's like, why does my best friend not have any pain issues, but my back hurts? Well, if I interviewed your best friend, they probably can't eat oat or dairy or gluten or any of these things. And so that's their thing. That's their back pain. And Dr. Alicia Batson had said that she's a doctor of internal medicine, and that now she is convinced that outside of celiac disease, every food intolerance or sensitivity is a TMS mind-body problem. And I think that she had said that she had like 15 or 16 diagnosed. You do a blood test or whatever the case is of showing that there's an allergy. And she's like, and yet they're all solved now. So, these are two really well-respected doctors in their field that are saying two things that, most people that don't know about this stuff would say I'm crazy or that they're crazy. But I think that those are the two most important. So if you have an issue that's not getting better a little bit each day, then it's almost certainly a mind-body issue. So that should rule out most things. And then the other one is that outside of celiac disease, all food allergies and intolerances are probably BS too. I think those are the two biggest ones.
I love it. Simple and to the point.
Yeah.
Okay. So other than finding you on the Mind and Fitness podcast, where else can people connect with you?
So there's a Facebook page that I wish I did a little bit more on, but there's a Facebook page, and then there's a group that's tied to it, and it's called the Deleters of Pain. So people can join that if they want. Sometimes there's some discussion, and then there goes these long periods where there's not a ton. And then Instagram, if you want to just see my personal life, really, it's just my full name at Eddy Lindenstein. And there's rarely TMS stuff posted on there. It's mostly like my kids and my dog and my motorcycle and my weightlifting and stuff like that. But the hope is that there's a website that's going to be coming soon at some point in time. I've had this vision or thought for probably a year and a half of doing like a video course. I've brought so much audio content, but not a lot of video content. So I bought a 4K GoPro with the dual purpose of motorcycle expedition videos and then doing mind-body related video content. So at some point in time, that'll be coming. It'll be the mindandfitnesspodcast.com because I own the domain. But as of the time that this airs, it probably won't be up and running. So those would be the places.
Okay. And what's the Facebook page called?
It's just the Mind and Fitness Podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's see. So Is there anything that you are super passionate to share or talk about that I haven't asked you yet?
No, I think that is. I mean, that you did a bang up job. That just about covers it. There's nothing else that I could think of that I could talk about in this realm. The only thing maybe is I talked about like finding new physical activities or ways to move.
Hmm.
I also think that having hobbies is enormously important. During the recovery for the back and neck issues and all that kind of stuff, before I had Red Sarno, so I'm being diagnosed with a variety of things throughout the process, I had no hobbies. So it was just I'd go to work all day, and then I would get up, and then I would go and see a doctor, and then I'd go see a physical therapist, and then I'd go home, and then I'd research all this stuff. So like that was my life. My world was very small. Um, I think that finding hobbies is immensely important, and there's a lot of different ones you can do. I love working in my yard. I'm a fish keeper, and if you don't know what that means, it means like I used to always think that having a fish tank is very simple, and you take the fish out, and then like you scrub down the gravel and the tank every couple of weeks, and then you're good. And then I come to find out that like no, it's like a really functioning ecosystem that can be very self-sustaining, and you buy the right kind of animals to consume the algae and bottom feed and all that kind of stuff. And so I've taken up fish keeping in the last year. That was like my quarantine hobby. But just finding stuff that you find interesting. My life is very full at this point, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't know what the hell I did with all my time 10 years ago. But now like I'm busy and I have stuff to do, but not in like a being busy for the sake of being busy. It's like being busy and having fun, and just the people that I talk to that have gone through these types of challenges in the TMS realm that are older, one thing they always push and emphasize is like just enjoying the time that you're here. And I think that by proxy, what that really means is like finding hobbies and things that you genuinely enjoy doing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I literally don't even know what I was just listening to or reading or watching the other day, but it was talking about everything you just said, which is how small our lives get when we end up chronically ill or in pain. And that what the biggest missing element is usually the joy and finding that joy again.
Yeah, I mean, like I drop a frozen cube of brine shrimp into my fish tank, and I watch the frogs go nuts. Like, pretty rare I see anything that like can just light up me and light up my kids than watching the frogs just like go for it.
Oh.
It's simple, right? But it's like it's just, or even my dumb dog, my black lab, dug these big holes in the back of my yard in two spots, and I've been working months on patching them and making them look normal and like everything else in the yard, and it just hasn't worked. And then I just went out and I was working on it a little while ago. I've had like fencing around it, and I put some sod over it and all that kind of stuff. And if turn it off if you don't understand any of this stuff and you find it boring. But I removed the fencing and then trimmed the clippings to be identical with the spot that I patched. And now you can't tell there was ever a hole there. Like that's gratification for me. So, just finding little things that you enjoy that can light you up and keep you going.
Absolutely. I love it. I think that's a really wonderful point to end it on. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I very much, I love yours. I love what you're doing. And I've just completely geeked out on so many episodes. And yeah, I just think that you're an inspiration. So it was a pleasure getting to have a chance to chat with you and be on this end.
Awesome. Thank you, Chaz.
All right, friends, that is a wrap. Thank you once again for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Have fun with the challenge this week, exploring your piqued curiosity, and until next time, make this week great.